Aloha, and welcome to SUPfm, the podcast for stand-up paddleboarders everywhere. So with no further ado, let's get out on the water and on with the show. Here are your hosts, Nick and Simon.
How's it, Simon? How are you doing?
I'm really good, thanks, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm great. I actually wanted to ask you who is on. I know we know who's on today because it's advertised, but Tez Plaveniaks, I think he kind of should be like a co-host of ours because this is the third time we've had him on.
Exactly. We've had a couple of recordings with him and he's great value, and what he doesn't know about stand-up paddleboard, indeed a whole variety of paddle sports and water sports, isn't worth knowing. And the episode today is particularly good because it covers an area that we haven't talked about previously, which is foiling, amongst other things.
That's something I really want to try. Do you have any foils lying about?
Not lying about. They're rather expensive and certainly not the things that you'd want to have lying about. But no, I mean, he's really interesting on the subject and really sparked my interest. So here he is, Tez Plaveniaks. So today we're welcoming back to SUPfm Tez Plaveniaks, who is editor of SUPMAGUK, and he's no stranger to SUPfm. We recorded a couple of episodes with him back in 2015. One, which was our most downloaded episode. It even beat our Kai Lenny episode, which was how to select your first stand-up paddleboard. And the second episode, which is an episode about paddle surfing. So, Tez, welcome back to SUPfm.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No problem at all. Well, first of all, it's been 5 years since we last spoke, and obviously a lot of things have changed in those 5 years, not least a very belated congratulations for adding to your family. You've got two lovely children now. Do they like getting their feet wet?
Yeah, they definitely do. I mean, that's our whole thing, is spending time down the beach, as a family. We're fortunate where we live to be surrounded by water, because it's an island that we live in, a little island on the south coast called Hailing Island, for those who are not aware. And there are plenty of options for getting in the water. Molly, she's now 5. Oscar, he's 2. And, both of them love getting in the sea, getting wet, jumping on and off paddleboards, messing about with windsurf gear, that kind of thing. And that's not, down to us as parents really pushing it. It's just how we live our lives. So by osmosis, it kind of naturally rubs off on them, and it's something that they actually want to do. They actually ask to do it, believe it or not. Although at the moment, because of the way things are, we are, stuck in the house, or rather the back garden, until things get better. But, things will get better, and we'll get back on it soon enough.
Fantastic. Have they caught their first waves yet?
Little waves, ripples, yeah. I mean, Molly was sort of, in fact, Molly had her first wave when she was 6 months old,
Wow.
And that was because she was just messing about in shore break with a board with me, and she decided to go off on her own, albeit under my supervision. It wasn't like I just left her. But yeah, so she's all over it. And like I say, Oscar, he's little brother and kind of follows suit. It's nice to see, it's nice to watch. We do have to be a bit careful with Molly. I know we were talking just before we started recording, but Molly had acute liver failure last year, which resulted in a transplant. And we do have to be aware of what's going on in terms of any potential risk to her. But at the same time, you have a transplant because the idea is that you live your life, and that part of her life, being around the beach, is intrinsically embedded in her because of us as parents who live that whole beach coastal lifestyle thing. Not to sound cheesy, it's just the way it is. But yeah, they both love it, and it's nice to see. It'd be nice when we can get back down there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess for all of us, certainly in the UK, we're all locked down. And there seems to be a very responsible attitude, I think, for us from stand-up paddleboarders. I
Yeah,
know
by and
the
large, I think,
government
yeah.
advice is any form of exercise, but I think certainly most people I know, and I know the guidance that you've put out is that we shouldn't risk placing ourselves in any situation which would need the emergency services coming out. So,
Even though I find it interesting. There are quite a number of hardcore riders, and this is not just within stand up. This is across a lot of water sports disciplines. Much more hardcore than any of us as everyday, riders, if you want to call us that. And very early on, they all were quite vocal about the fact that they were going to abstain and not do anything surrounding the sports that are effectively their livelihoods, their jobs, And I think
yeah.
people like that are abstaining and not doing the thing. The rest of us should take note because there's something there, And I don't want to get all
Mm.
preachy about stuff. People make their own decisions and choices, adults, they're free to do what they want. But actually, in the times that we're living in at the moment, I do think personally it would be a very selfish act to go out because it's connecting the dots. It's not just about what happens to us as individuals or could potentially happen to us as individuals. It's what the knock-on effects of those happenings could well be. And that's the thing that some people in the early days of the whole COVID-19 thing sort of missed a little bit. But I think by and large, over the last couple of weeks, as it stands, for want of a better term, people have wound their necks in and now not, doing
Exactly.
things
Well,
that involve.
reality kicks in, doesn't it? And
Yeah,
I think the other thing is anyone who spent any time in the water knows that unexpected situations are just that, they're unexpected, and it doesn't take much to cause that additional stressor. So, but
that's it. Yeah,
certainly from the circles that I run in, I think everyone's taken a very sensible approach to it, stayed in and doing their bit for the NHS, which obviously we're all trying to do.
yeah,
So moving forward onto SUP, I mean, 5 years it's been since we last spoke to you, and I know that in one of our first conversations we talked about a quote from Laird Hamilton, who said that he saw SUP as the next big thing,
yeah,
and he thought that he could see it as being bigger than surfing.
yeah.
Where do you think SUP is on that sort of balance at the moment?
Depends what area of stuff you're talking about, I suppose.
Mm,
I think sup surfing, sup racing. I wouldn't necessarily say on a par with one another in terms of participation. In fact, sup racing has arguably dropped off in the last couple of years in terms of numbers. Sup surfing is sort of around the same sort of level, maybe, but it's not that you'd go to a beach, certainly in the UK anyway, you'd not go to a beach in the
mm,
UK and be inundated with paddle surfers, which was one of the fears expressed by
mm,
the surfing fraternity sort of back in the early days of stand-ups, sort of renaissance, if you like. In terms of recreational paddling, and by that I mean literally just going out afloat on the water, numbers are fairly high. I think inflatable stand-up paddleboards have got a lot to, say for that. Being able to get hold of a board that can fold down and are
yeah.
relatively affordable, infinitely transportable and all that kind of stuff, regardless of whether people actually do deflate them or not. Forget all that. But
Mm,
the actual inflatable market has been responsible for sort of pulling people in. I think numbers are fairly healthy. I don't think it's not going to disappear as a sport, as it were, if you want to call it a sport. I mean, some people probably wouldn't even call it as a sport. That's the thing, it's just something that they do when they go to the beach, and only even maybe a handful of times a year. Um,
yeah.
out of that handful of people that do get involved via the inflatable route, the hope is that one or two maybe would then progress on, if not, to buy something more performance orientated in terms of kit. Maybe they might still stick with the recreational paddling. They just might buy a touring board, for instance. But actually, the hope is that they progress on to one of the other disciplines, and sort of maybe get a bit more performance about it. But actually, if they don't, they don't. It's fine.
Yeah.
So maybe in terms of the quote that Laird put out initially, is it bigger than surfing? I don't think that's the case. Certainly, as it stands, it's more accessible than surfing, that's for sure. The problem is, of course, over the last couple of years, other things have come into the mix. The hydrofoil thing. I do a lot of foiling myself. And a lot of the people, what you would consider to be the hardcore elite, if you like, that were once pushing stand up really hard, like Laird, like the whole open ocean paddling thing, downwinding, which never really caught on in this country. Surfing again. I think a lot of the guys and girls that were sort of pushing it have diverted their attentions away to maybe foils. And of course, more recently, the whole wing foiling thing has come in. And that again has sort of diluted and distracted away from SUP. People who SUP still love it. And in fact, I was doing another podcast, funnily enough, with somebody the other day, and talking about this very thing. The act of standing on a paddleboard. It's really hard to convey to the onlooker and those not initiated the feel of what it is. But just standing on a board, as you well know, because you do it, standing on a board, being on the water, paddling around a little bit, nothing too hardcore. The feeling is joyous. Is that the word to use? I don't know.
Exactly.
And that's
absolutely. It engaged you on so many different levels, doesn't it? I mean, I think it's really interesting what you said. I mean, there's so many different disciplines, and obviously that's something else that sort of emerged over the last 5 years. It was always sort of racing and surfing and touring and all of those elements. And I think when I last spoke to you, WinSUP was becoming a thing, something which I'm sure that you've got a view on. But I just wanted to speak to you about the foiling, because that's very much of the moment. And I've seen you certainly on your Instagram feed and sort of getting involved there. What's the how would one get started on a SUP, on a foil? Can you get started quickly? What's the sort of the cycle of skill you need to get up and?
I started foiling 4 years ago now, and that's windsurf foiling or wind foiling, depending on what you want to call it. And I sort of around the same kind of time I started SUP foiling as well. And the problem with SUP foiling is unlike wind foiling, certainly again in the UK, is you need certain conditions that not everybody might necessarily have access to, and that is a regular, consistent, but slightly low power, to some degree mushy wave, should we say. Not everybody's going to agree with this, I know, because there are probably people out there that have got much better skill than me and whatever. But for people getting involved in it to start off with, you need access to those conditions. The problem is with the SUP and a foil, there is no power source. I know you've got your paddle, and yes, you do see videos posted online of paddlers literally going from standstill, using the paddle to propel themselves forward, and then being able to put themselves up on foil. I can tell you categorically that is one of the most difficult things you can do. I have managed it a few times, but it's when, again, conditions have been pretty idyllic, i.e. totally glassy, flat water, completely devoid of any kind of water movement such as wave, swell, wind or current. And also as well, particular kit, i.e. big front foil wings, to help increase that lift. And then you've got to have a decent amount of paddling skill as well. Plus, you've got to understand how to pump a board up onto the foil in the first place. So flat water foil pumping, if you like, from standstill using a paddle as your engine, really, really hard. So most people will come at it from wanting to foil in waves. But like I say, you need a specific type of wave, i.e. the wave needs to peel to a degree or at least hold up. It needs to have some kind of face on it, some kind of shape to it, but not too much vert, because it doesn't want to be too powerful and give you too much speed. And then, like I say, to a degree, it needs to be mushy as well, which sort of, dissipates that power a little bit. But then you've got to be able to surf as well, and also paddle surf, because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
If you haven't got those foundational skills, it's not to say that you wouldn't be able to do it, but it would be a lot harder. And then, of course, there's the other thing about falling. You fall a lot when you foil, and you need to know how to fall, because the worst thing you can do is fall in such a way that you then have this big piece of carbon coming back at you to belt you in the head or whatever. Foils are hard, and some are very sharp, as in they've got quite sharp edges. The industry's kind of addressed that a little bit now with some of the more modern foils, and they're tending to round the edges off, or sort of, bend them over, if you like, so they're not going to cause as much issue. But the fact is, foils are still quite hard pieces of kit, and they're big as well. And just getting to the point where you understand, for instance, if you just jump off a SUP that's got a foil on, so you haven't fallen, you just jump off to come away from your board, just the way in which the board keeps going with the foil attached to it, the way it sort of floats and still wants to lift, and it's sort of been out, you kind of need to get to a point where you have to understand all that to be able to be safe, and then go out in the conditions that are ideal for it. Not take too many risks, not go anywhere where there are loads of people. I mean, that's the worst thing in the world ever. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. I've been in the vicinity of somebody foiling who's fallen off, and it's been very close to me, and it's not a good thing. When you see some of the really good guys do it, it looks blissful, and it can be. But it can also not be, and it can also be a real pain in the backside as well if you're learning. It takes a while. It takes a while. It's actually much quicker, or it was for me. And again, I appreciate, because I've got prior experience, but it was much quicker for me to learn how to windsurf foil. And I don't kite surf foil, but I assume it's the same for the kiter guys as well. It's much quicker if you can do the wind and the kite surf foiling, and then you migrate the skills to SUP or even surf foiling, because you've already got that understanding of the foil, and you understand where your feet need to be, and you just have that, the sort of
intuitive touched.
It's not so much intuitive. I don't think anybody's really intuitive with foiling yet.
Well, muscle memory, I guess.
But yeah, it's that muscle memory thing. It's just unknowing and having the understanding from having had the feeling of being on a foil, how to deal with it, And then obviously you've got to adapt your skills to SUP foiling in waves. Of course, there's downwind SUP foiling as well, which I've done a little bit of, and that's its own thing as well. That's also quite tricky. It's it's definitely fun. It adds another dynamic and dimension to your existing paddling. It can really spice things up on a mediocre day. But actually, there's still a lot of scope for just paddling with your board stuck to the water as well for a lot of people. And to sort of give an example of that, where I live, we have what a lot of people would determine to be a really good SUP foil wave, and it is at times, because we also have quite a lot of tide. And unfortunately, having this big dangly carbon thing protruding out the back of your board is, at certain states of tide, like low tide, for instance, it's not really the right thing to go on, because you're going to be so far away from where the peak actually is forming, that you won't actually have anything to propel you forwards and push you up on the foil. In that case, you're better off being on, particularly when it's smaller, you're better off being on like on a race board, for instance, and just doing long glides on a race board. And then when the tide fills in and you've got a bit more water depth, then maybe swap to a foil because you've got the clearance. So because I've seen it, I've seen people really just I want to sup foil today. I want to go foiling. I want to go foiling. Right, right. They go out, it's low tide, and then they find that they can't get anywhere near the peak because it's too shallow. And then they're just floating around. In which case, you kind of like, go and swap your gear. Go and get another board, Go and get a race board. Go and get a 10'6" or something like that. Have a bit of fun. And then when conditions do finally, switch on for what you want to do, that's when you can go and get your foil, And that's the thing. It's just, you need to kind of be adaptive and read the conditions.
Well, I think anyone who's used to surfing, I'm not that far away from you, but Hayling and sort of the Dorset coast isn't well known for its consistent waves. So I think certainly that's something that we'd both be used to doing, waiting for the right conditions. If they're not exactly right, then there's a problem. What about using a wing? Have you tried that?
Yeah, quite a few times. I mean, I'm not what you call an expert at it by any means, for the simple reason that there's only so much time in the day, and as we've already discussed, I have a family and I have other commitments. There's a guy who lives very close to me who I actually have help sometimes with the testing of wings, because we can't ignore them. They are sort of part of these sports now, and I don't think wings will go away either. In terms of how easy are they to use, again, if you've got prior foil understanding and knowledge and skills, and then combine that with a degree of understanding of wind sports, so if you windsurf or kitesurf, you won't find it that much of a chore, particularly if you're using the right kit. Again, it's a low power discipline, so something that gives you lots and lots of lift in really low powered conditions. So a big foil wing, is going to help you with that. They've got their place. You can see again from the videos and sort of various posts from the likes of Kai Lenny and the Spencer brothers, and the guys that live out in Maui, how they're using them to sort of get out on a mushy day because it's around the 15 to 20 knot mark, and they're using them to get out to the break. And then once they're sort of riding back in on the wave, they're just letting
they go
the wing flag, and they're just then using the power of the wave to keep them up on foil. So and again, the guy who I work with, Kev, he does that here. He'll go out to the end of the sandbar, on the wing, and then coming back in, he's just using the power of the wave. I think again though, as with everything, they do need time spent. Because you're not just going to turn up and become an expert at it. You might if you've got the prior foil experience and the prior wind experience, you might get up on the foil first time. Absolutely. And actually, coming back to wind foiling quickly, if you've got any windsurfing experience, I always tell people you will learn to windsurf foil quicker than you ever learn how to get in the foot straps, harness, and plane when you were, sort of trying to get all those skills down when you were learning how to windsurf, for the simple reason that you've got all those foundational skills. If you've got those foundational skills, you could find, you step straight on a board, bang, you're up on the foil. But then what you've got to do is consolidate that and become more proficient a pilot, because then what you're trying to do is sustain their flight on foil, control your ride height, be safe, be able to turn around efficiently, and basically do everything the foil promises. And that all takes practice and time, and time practiced in the right conditions. And as we know, Mother Nature in the UK doesn't serve us up the most consistent of conditions, wind or wave.
Absolutely.
So it's a time thing, I think they're a tool for sure. And they're another way if you're looking to maximise your time on the water. I think the really interesting thing with wings is if they can get them to a point where they're efficient for anybody trying to pilot their board stuck to the water, i.e. not on foil.
Mm.
The problem with them is,
Yeah.
at the moment, unless you're using a board that's got some form of lateral resistance around the mid part of the hull of the board,
Mm.
as well as the fin, then the traction to get upwind isn't there. So what you tend to do is drift off downwind. And a lot, you saw the likes of Nash and all those people over in Hawaii when they first came, because again, wings are nothing new. They've been around for ages. But when the renaissance of wings came around again, really last summer, they were trying to push the fact that you could use them on a SUP without a foil. And you can, absolutely. But if you're flogging these toys to people with no wind experience, they're just going to float downwind all the time and get really, really frustrated. And I've actually seen that happen here in my locale as well. So I think if we can develop the kit that's actually applicable to foiling and non-foiling, that'd be really interesting. And if people can develop their skills to make use of them in both environments as well, that would be really interesting. But they're a good thing by and large, I think. Have you tried one or not?
No, I haven't. I mean, but it looks absolutely spectacular. I'm sort of, as you know, a converted dry land athlete. I would play rugby for God knows how many years, so relatively recent. Last sort of 6 or 7 years convert to SUP. But no, I'd love to have a go. I think that thing about landing on the foil that would probably worry me a little bit. I'll tell you something that I have seen, which looks great fun, is the e-foils. I don't know whether you've seen those.
Yeah, the electric.
It's a foil with a propeller at the bottom. That it takes some of the joy out of the skill levels, but they did look fun.
Sort of yes and no. I mean, you still have to have a degree of skill because you're still having to control the ride height. With e-foils as well. It's not just a case of throttle down and throttle up to sort of control. It's still weight distribution, which is going to allow you to get that optimum ride height and stay on foil and not crash, because you can still crash. And actually crashing when you're doing
25 miles an hour.
Exactly. You're still potentially going to come a cropper. E-foils, I don't know. I mean, my own inner jury is out on those. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I haven't tried one. They're on the cards, but I think they're, as it stands, passing opinion, having not tried one, which may be the right thing to do, but I don't know. I think they're only one step away from a jet ski, really.
Exactly. I mean, whenever you put sort of mechanics on it or propellers on it, the purist in me tells me that's sort of taking some of the joy out of it. But it does look like fun.
I mean, that's the thing. Fun, and they may turn a completely benign flat water period into something quite interesting. I don't know. We'll see.
So just moving back to SUP and the last 5 years and so on. I think one of the things that we talked about on one of our sessions was about the industry standard and how various different bodies were sort of competing to take control and be the sort of official body of stand-up paddleboarding. I don't think things have changed too much over the last 5 years.
It's got worse. Yeah, you know what? If you want a really good insight as to the chaos of governing bodies within stand-up paddleboarding, just check out Chris and SUP Racer. His sort of articles on the SUP Racer site, and he's doing a blog as well. Him and some of the guys that he talks to about this, he knows quite a lot about it. It's a bit of a joke, really, and the politics involved is just mind-boggling, but he gives some good insight if you really want to find out all about that kind of thing. We haven't got to a point, really, where there's anybody in control, and actually that word control, should that really be associated with a sport where the majority of people just don't give a toss anyway? Probably not. I mean, the majority don't. The only reason, I suppose, to sort of get an official governing body in place, well, actually there's two reasons. The first one is for accredited coaching, and we have accredited coaching instructor training programs anyway. and then the other one is the Olympic pathway. And actually, is
Yeah.
anybody is there anybody really in a recreational sense bothered about the Olympic pathway of SUP?
No.
Probably not. Those athletes who compete will probably be, potentially as well, if they've got a shot at maybe getting to the Olympics. And I understand that. I appreciate that. You know what I mean? You can't knock that sort of aspect. But recreational paddlers are just not interested, really. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's principally about the coaching side, and having joined the ranks of instructors in the last 5 years, there needs to be sort of quality around the instruction, certainly,
Yeah.
particularly as so many new paddlers sort of get into the learn their skills, and certainly it's something that I would recommend for any new paddler, regardless of how often they get out on the water. Just to have a session really lifts their appreciation of those 1 or 2 times a year that they actually do go out there. But it certainly seems to be a little bit of chaos in the accrediting bodies, and doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon. But as you say, makes very little difference to the average paddler who, let's face it, is the recreational side.
That's it.
So just moving on in terms of SUPMAG UK. I mean, I've been a subscriber to it for quite a few years, and I noticed that as part of the sort of current reaction to the coronavirus, you've put the latest edition up there free on your website. I've really noticed, though, that the SUPMAG UK piece is a bit of a misnomer, because you seem to be covering things internationally far more than you did before. You always had a few bits and pieces in there, but you certainly seem to be covering the rest of the world. Was that a deliberate editorial decision on your part?
I mean, most things, if you look hard enough, have got a UK slant, So we might, let's say, talk to an Austrian paddler about their trip to, I don't know, wherever they decided to go off to, let's say the Arctic Circle. The point being is, that's actually a UK angle, believe it or not, because that is knowledge of a potential location that somebody in the UK might go,
Yeah.
I quite fancy that. I've got the details there because such and such went to location X, and I've now got a base knowledge so I can plan my trip and off I go when I've got all the T's crossed and I's dotted, So might seem more internationally focused, but it's still, the same as it ever was, really. And that is give the knowledge, give the information to the UK paddler, and if anybody else wants to read it, and we do have, a decent audience globally, which is great. I love the fact that we do, and that's also going to be interesting to them as well. Hopefully.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't tunnel vision things. You've got to evolve your product, if you want to call it a product, as the industry evolves with it as well. And for with the best will in the world, talking about paddling on Birmingham Canal for the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th time, as much as that is a thing for people, and again, I'm not knocking it, because I know I come from that area and I know what it's like now, and as a SUP destination, it's actually a really nice one, in the years they've cleaned the area up. But, like I say, we try and be as diverse as we possibly can and as broad as we possibly can, and cover as many different things as we can. I get a bit of flack my way because of some of the things that we decide to include. Over the years we've included outrigger. More recently we've included pro and paddleboarding. We obviously promote windsup. And people would say, "Oh, yeah, that's because Tez is a windsurfer," and what's OC doing in there? Well, the fact is, all these sports have been brought ever closer together, and they're all linked. They're all intrinsically linked. And if you're any kind of water-going person, of sort, then you will be open-minded enough. And actually, stand-up is one of those sports that has opened people's minds to other opportunities, and that's not just other sports. That's where else can I do it? Who else can I do it with? and so on and so forth. So yeah, we try and be as diverse. I try and be as diverse and as versatile as we possibly can, really. And if
Yeah, and that's brilliant. I think it's a magazine which certainly people from abroad should take a good look at, because there's so many opportunities there for adventure, so many suggestions, and I just find it sort of sparks me off all the time.
yeah,
So and also just to mention as well, Tez, that all your back issues are there to be read. So
they are indeed, yeah.
anyone in lockdown at the moment can probably
And
well,
the
I
same
think
for Winter UK magazine as well.
exactly. Lockdown will probably be finished by the time you make your way through all of those. So where does SUPMAG UK go next?
It depends on the industry as much as anything else. I mean, we are covering wings. We've already talked about that. That is a new thing. As far as I'm concerned, like I say, it's part of it. Who knows what else is going to come out there, come out in the future. We'll still keep covering the race aspects, the whitewater aspects. In fact, whitewater is one of the things that we've probably covered, I think, more than any other SUP magazine.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm wrong on that. I don't know, but
No, absolutely.
we've had whitewater SUP covers, countless articles about it, because as far as I'm concerned, that is an untapped area. I've dabbled with a bit of it. I'm not, again, anyway, hardcore whitewater paddling.
Where have you gone?
Oh, so there's a guy I know up in Oxford. He goes by the handle of Wave Cloud. Some people listening might know who Dave is. Again, he's quite a colourful chap. But I've been to his local spot, which isn't, like I say, it's nothing particularly hardcore at all. But it's just a fun standing wave that you get running down a weir under a bridge, and it's just quite a nice spot to sort of get. I don't come from a whitewater background at all, so I was a bit out of my depth to start with. But then you sort of get the feel of it, and the articles and the videos are online about that, and it's certainly, like I say, an untapped area of SUP, really quite under the radar. In fact, same as downwinding as well.
Yeah.
And I sort of, where do we go as a magazine? I'd love to sort of build upon and do more of all this kind of under the radar stuff as well. But again, like I say, time is only so much, and we sort of have to do what we do. But moving forwards, there's certainly scope, lots of different scope. But yeah, I don't know how the industry's going to evolve now. We've got the wing thing, the hydrofoil thing, and we've also still got the race, the SUP, the recreational, the inflatable, and all those they're still there. I'm not sure what new thing could come about.
Well, yeah, and certainly that was how I felt about 5 years ago. It seems that every year there's an additional element to it. But I mean the whitewater supping looks absolutely fantastic. You have to get properly kitted up for that, though, haven't you? I mean, it's
yeah. Yeah, river water is its own thing, particularly moving river water. The hydraulics that you find around weirs and sort of dams, and again, it's something that I know a bit about, but I'm not an expert in. But yeah, you definitely have to have the right gear, impact vest if you're going to do some serious whitewater paddling, the right kind of leashicles. That was a whole debate a few years ago. Even sort of down to whether you wear a wetsuit or a dry suit, and that kind of thing, and just understanding the environment that you're going to go into. But it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one for sure. I don't know why it's never really taken off in this country, although maybe I do. Maybe it's because of the access thing, which has always been a bit problematic. Maybe that is what it is. I don't know. But I mean, there's still brands out there like Badfish, for instance, over in the US. Hala gear, they sort of, I suppose they're the equivalent of Badfish, but they sort of deal more with the inflatable side. These are like hardcore whitewater river running SUP brands, and they put a lot of time and effort into their gear, and their gear's good. And the riders that they've got on their sort of their roster all know their stuff, and it's definitely there. I mean, but then you look at people like Dan Gaver, who was probably still is, along with Corin Addison. Corin we've had in the magazine penning multiple articles. They're probably the top of the game in terms of the white water elements. But Dan in particular, he's sort of branched off now, and he's gone. I'm sure he still paddles rivers, but he's gone down from what I can see, he's gone down the whole wingfall thing, and he's now sort of getting really involved with that. He's putting out quite a lot of tutorial vids online. He's one of Fanatic's riders, and I think one of the development riders for the whole wing foil thing. I'm not sure if that's 100%, but But other than like Corin and Dan, really, I can't. There's not really anybody else really super high profile doing the whitewater SUP thing. I'd love it to change. I'd love to see more of it, but I don't know.
Absolutely, and as you say, it's locations and access. I guess like the surf around the UK, there's only sort of limited opportunities to go for it. But looks like fantastic fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Just moving on, because you've been very kind with your time today on this Good Friday, and so I just wanted to have a quick chat, or just to ask you about your bucket list. So your SUP bucket list.
Right.
Over the years, we've seen you in so many different locations enjoying paddleboarding. I just wondered whether there were any places in the UK or abroad, events, anything like that you really fancied having a bash at.
I don't. That's a tough one. There's so many. so many. I love Maui. I've always loved Maui. We've been, and I definitely want to go back, and not just for stand-up. The whole place is fantastic. It's just one of those locations. If you're anything to do with the water, you just need to go there. And again, not because that's where a lot of pros are, because actually when we were there, we saw very, very few. But just in terms of the conditions, the abundance of conditions you've got for all these different sports, along the same section of road. And I'm thinking sort of into Lahaina and going back the other way as well, sort of on the South Shore. You've just got, for the average or everyday paddler, you've got I think there's in excess of something like 30 different spots that you can get in, look one after the other, and that's just on that one road. And then there's all the other stuff on the North Shore, and going back, like I say, the other way. I'd love to go back to Maui, definitely. But then I also fancy a place like there's been a lot of sort of press about, I think I'm pronouncing this right, Lofoten, which is sort of Arctic Circle way.
Right.
Some of the Lofoten Islands up there are worth a look. Very remote, cold, but pristine as well. You can snowboard and surf in the same day, kind of thing.
Wow.
We had a guy, one of the pro windsurf guys, who also does quite a bit of paddleboarding, and he does these off the sort of beaten track trips. A guy called Adam Sims did an article for us. He basically went over there with another pro windsurfer, Ricardo Maca, and they sort of did this, and his girlfriend, I think, went with him as well. And they sort of took SUPs, windsurf gear, surfboards and stuff, and they just had this phenomenal time, and it just looked amazing, absolutely phenomenal.
Incredible
place to be. But there's so many. I don't even know, because I haven't been. The Hebrides, Tyree. I'm a windsurfer, and Tyree Classic is every year, and I've never been. All of
some of those beaches are incredible.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, Skye, and they even have some nice lines coming through.
Yeah, exactly. But then the Isle of Wight. I live just across the way from the Isle of Wight. I hardly know the place. That's somewhere. Again, I've got friends who live over there, and they talk about certain spots, and I've seen photos and things, and I'm like, I just love to get across and get involved in some predominantly wave action. But it's just time. It is. It's difficult. You have a family. I've got a family, and I've got a family with a little girl that needs attention, and it's it's kind of what it is, and we have to be fair and sensible and also as well, these days, getting to places and doing certain things costs a fair bit of cash. And don't get me wrong, I'm not completely monetary focused. I wouldn't be working in the water sports industry if I was. But you do need some form of finance to get you to these places, and then the time to do it as well. I mean, a friend said to me a couple of years ago, he was like, "You're sort of in this position, other than when you go away periodically, it's mainly doorstep sessions that you get." And I was like, "Yeah, that's right," because of the responsibilities that I've got. I'm not in a position where I used to be, where it was, like with Good Friday, as you say today, we would have thought nothing of jumping in the car or the van, booting off down to Cornwall or Devon or whatever. And deepest dark is Cornwall and Devon, so maybe 6-7 hours drive, score a session, for a couple of hours, and then drive all the way back in on the same day, and then go somewhere different like tomorrow, and then maybe do something on the Sunday as well. I can't do that anymore. It's just not viable. So as much as I've got all these places that I'd love to get to, it's kind of like as and when, really.
Yeah, well, exactly. But you got to keep focusing on them, haven't you? I mean, I've got to say, Maui sounds absolutely awesome. That's definitely.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, we'll still do trips and holidays abroad when obviously we come out of lockdown, and that'll all be sort of rolled into what we're talking about now. But it might not necessarily be for like 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It might be for 2 or 3 kind of thing. But that's fine. It's fine. I worked overseas for a long time, so I did a lot of travelling when I was younger. And as much as I'm not prepared to give that up, at the same time, I did a lot. So it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Well, look, Tez, really appreciate your time. Very aware that you've given up so much time on a bank holiday afternoon. So thanks very much for spending time with us today. Keep up the fantastic work on SUPMAG UK. Just remind us how to get hold of you and your social media details.
I am everywhere on the internet. If you can't find me on the internet, there is something wrong. You can find my contact details on the SUPMAG UK and Windsurf UK websites. There's my Instagram feed, which is just my name. There is my Facebook feed, which is also just my name. And if you just Google my name, you will find me coming up against a whole different things to do with water sports of all types. So I'm pretty easy to get hold of.
Thanks very much again for your time, Tez. Very much appreciated. And we'll, of course, attach all of your details to the show notes on this episode. So there we go.
Nice one. Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to SUPfm, the #1 podcast for stand-up paddlers wherever you are. If you like what you've heard, please leave us a review on iTunes. Until then, we'll see you on the water.